Good evening, everybody. My name is Nancy Vandell. I'm chairperson for the Nusquam Citizen Advisory Committee, and I call the meeting to order at 7:01 on Thursday, July 30th at 7 p.m., 7:01 p.m. I certify a quorum, and I think it may be Andrea. Could you please mute?
Yes, I'm having a hard time. I'm going upstairs, but I'm having a hard time getting to the actual position that I can. Could you mute me?
I think I can, yes. Let me just check here.
Because I'm taking some notes and that took me off the visual screen.
Got it.
So thank you.
I think I can host tools.
Please forgive me for the background.
Oh, yes, I can. There, I can do it up in your window. Okay. All right. So I think we're good. All right. And since you mentioned that, Andrea, let me just mention that the video will be put up on the website after the meeting. And it'll be under our references section on the website. So and it may take a couple of days. Our illustrious Secretary Candace, it takes a while to get those things up there. So if you want them before, you can send an email to info at our NCAC email, and we can send you a direct link. So I've already had a couple of people ask for that who couldn't make it. So yeah, I think you'll be able to watch, and there's also a transcription you can access as well. If you're looking at taking notes, I don't think you need to. Okay, so certified a quorum. I'd like to do introductions and conflict of interest statements from board members. So I have no conflicts. Could the board members present please state any conflicts and introduce yourselves?
Wyatt Angelo, no conflicts.
Susan Schomburg, no conflicts.
Candace Miller, no conflicts.
Michael Beachley, parliamentarian, no conflicts.
Okay, I think that's it that's here tonight. Thank you. And I'd also, I think because we have so many people, I'm not going to have everybody do introductions tonight, but thank you all. It's a great crowd here today. I just want to briefly run through the agenda. This is a special meeting, so it's one topic. I'll be introducing Director Sarah Absher here shortly, but and thank her for coming. So can everybody see the agenda?
Yes.
Move it here. Okay, so basically being a special meeting, we have one topic, and it's for Director Absher's presentation on short-term rental code enforcement update. So we'll go through some of the meeting protocols here in a moment, and then there'll be plenty of time for questions. Just briefly going through our calendar, next Monday, actually in a week, we're going to have a community plan steering subcommittee meeting, which is the regular committee meeting. It's not feedback sessions yet, although there'll be some announcements at our membership meeting about that. And then Saturday, August 22nd will be our regular membership meeting. And as you may have seen in our email blasts, we've deferred to August 22nd from our normal August 8th time, so that everybody can go to the fair. It also gives a little bit more distance between this meeting and that meeting. We're looking forward to some great speakers at that meeting too. And then August 24th is another community plan steering subcommittee meeting. They're hard at work and a meeting every 2 weeks. And then Wednesday, August 26th is our monthly executive board meeting. So going through the meeting protocols, we put on here questions will be taken at the end, but Director Absher said that she's actually going through in sections. So at the end of each section, we'll stop and you have an opportunity to ask questions. Because we have so many people, please put in the chat that you are interested in asking a question. You can either say, I want to ask a question, or you can ask the question in the chat and we'll read it for you. That's your choice, but that allows us to make sure everybody is taken in order of when they put the question in the chat. You don't have to wait till the end to put your question in the chat. You can put it in anytime. If you have any questions regarding protocol, our parliamentarian, Michael Beachley, is here to help, and you can send him a private message through the chat. As opposed to a question for everybody, and he would be happy to help you. He's terrific. So when we do get to the questions, I know some people have some very specific situations they'd like to ask about, but we're going to ask you to please phrase them so they're general situations. We're not going to talk about specific situations at this tonight, but just reframe them as general. And I may help you with that, or Michael may help you with that beforehand, or Director Absher herself can help you with that. I'm looking forward to her talk. And then, so we'll have questions throughout, and then at the end, any member comments are welcome as long as it's on this agenda item. Any questions on the agenda? I didn't put a stop time. We have the meeting scheduled to go till 9, but I don't know how long it will actually take. So the agenda is approved. Okay, so I think at this point, I'm going to introduce Director Sarah Absher, who's the Director of Community Development for Tillamook County. She is also our advisor to the NCAC and to all of the CACs. And I tell you, we need 3 Sarahs in the department because she does so much. And I know she works nights, she works weekends. Here she is tonight. The county, I don't know what the county would do without her. So I just have to say that we've worked with her through the bylaws subcommittee over the last 3 years, and she's just incredibly knowledgeable and helpful. So we appreciate you coming tonight, Sarah, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you for the warm welcome and introduction. Feelings are mutual. There's a lot of dedicated members in Nescoin that have helped do all of this work. It hasn't been just me. So to you and everyone else, thank you. And I'm so excited to see everyone on a Thursday night. So thanks for staying up late and joining me to talk about short-term rentals. As Nancy mentioned, I do have a slide deck. I actually just sent the slide deck to the admin email. So
okay.
you have that to post after the meeting, because I think it would probably be helpful if you had that. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a share screen, Nancy. So let me make sure I have permissions. Okay. Actually, hang on just a sec.
It should be open for you.
Yep. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go ahead. And where's my Zoom? Okay, I'm going to do a share screen. It's going to take me a minute because Zoom is different. So you're going to see my desktop that's fully loaded with a picture of a parrot. So I think that's what you should all see. And then I'm going to go ahead and start the slideshow, which should pop up. Oh, nope, it did it wrong. Never mind. Okay, let me try this again. It's always a surprise. You never know how this is going to work.
Yeah. Do you want me to take the one you emailed? But you're going to want to change the slides.
No, I will go. Yeah, so it's okay. I just was Microsoft Teams. I know Zoom is always a surprise. Okay, so you guys are going to see yourselves for just a moment. If you do, I apologize for the awkwardness. Okay, now you should see 2025 year in review. Yeah, we got that? Okay, perfect. And I had July 11th because I put this together for that date. So actually it's July 30th, I think. So sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a couple of things tonight. Part of what I've been trying to do is talk about the short-term rental program in broad terms of the program itself, and then all of the things that connect with the program. So it's not just about enforcement and violations, just really wanting to highlight to the community the breadth and depth of this program and how it intersects with other programs throughout the county as well. The enforcement is an important part of it, but I do think there's equally important parts that I think the community would also be interested in learning more about. So just to start out with Nescoin specifically, you have a cap of 191 licenses. And then just pulling off from this afternoon, from the license waitlist for Nescoin specifically, there are 6 people on the waitlist. And I will tell you that this is one of the shortest waitlists for your community I've seen in a very, very long time. So that can mean a few things, but that is your waitlist today. So you have 6 folks waiting for licenses. So in the presentation, I'm going to talk about some TLT updates. I'm going to talk about a 2025 summary of the program, the hotline data, what's next, and then how this program intersects with the operator license fee program. And then I'd like to talk about CAPS and then, of course, community feedback. So these are the sections that I've got the presentation divided into. And Nancy, I cannot see the chat. So if someone has a question or if someone raises their hand, please let me know so I can stop talking.
Yes, thank you. And I forgot to, with Susan Schoenberg's permission, I'm appointing her to be the minutes taker tonight. And she and I will share checking the chat.
Okay. Great, thank you. Okay, so getting some of the easy stuff out of the way. We've been tracking over time the transient lodging tax, how much of the tax is generated by STRs. And this is important because, as many of you are aware, there's been a reallocation of the 70-30 split to 50-50, right? There are other programs that benefit or rely on transient lodging tax. So in Tillamook County specifically, this is a very important slide because it gives us the information to see that 70% of the transient lodging tax generated in the county comes from short-term rentals. Another way to look at this, you can see over time how that gap between STRs and other transient lodging types has widened. It peaked in 2021 and 2022, and then it has remained steady at 73%. But a lot of this, most of our zoning codes, especially in unincorporated Tillamook County, do not allow for motels or hotels as outright permitted uses, right? And I think that's one of the real fundamental reasons why we don't look like other coastal communities, is simply because zoning districts don't allow for other types of transient lodging as outright permitted uses. In fact, none of these typically are allowed outright. So in terms of calendar year 2025, I've put some arrows by some of the revenue data that I think you would be interested in. So Nescoin, in 2025, it was almost $850,000 in transient lodging tax that was generated in the Nescoin community alone. Probably not surprising is that Pacific City was the highest gross revenue producer. And you can see for Manzanita, Nehalem, Wheeler, Rockaway Beach, incorporated cities, we have the 1% collection. So that is why those numbers are much lower. It's because the majority of the TLT stays within those cities. Director Chris Lady from Public Works gave a presentation a few months back about the road system. And so perhaps for those of you that did not see that, when it comes to TLT, 30% of our TLT revenue is dedicated to the County Road Fund, which equates to roughly $2 million annually for the Tillamook County Public Works budget. And of that, $1.3 million is allocated to paving projects annually. This is something that we have been tracking over time. You can see, so what this graph represents is going back to 2014 when the transient lodging tax was passed by the voters of Tillamook County. You can see the number of accounts, so countywide, so this is city and unincorporated accounts, all things transient lodging. You can see that we had roughly 1,500 accounts. And that is the blue graph. And you can see over time how that has grown. But what's interesting about that is to see how we have gotten to the point to where the intermediaries are now paying a significant portion of the TLT filing on that quarterly basis. And for some of you that may be aware, one of the concerns that Tillamook County shares with many other jurisdictions across the state is that basically we get a check. So there's not a whole lot of back end accounting that comes with those quarterly filing. And so we are continuing to diligently track how much of our TLT filing is done by these intermediaries. And I anticipate legislation or something to come in the future that will require more transparency in those filings. There's, like I said, there's many jurisdictions that are not comfortable with the current filing system for those intermediaries. Okay, so I can stop there if anyone has any questions. Just wanted to give a quick TLT overview in case anybody had any interest in asking anything.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat yet, Director Absher.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so program highlights. There's a couple of milestones that we met in 2025. Probably the biggest one is that all of the changes that were part of the Ordinance 84 Amendment 2 process were fully implemented by the end of 2025. If you recall, in that ordinance, there were some things that went into effect in 2024, and there were some things that went into effect in 2025. So theoretically, 2026 is the first year where all of the program updates are now fully into effect. And so this will be our first year to fully track everything all together, all program updates. The biggest program update of 2025 was implementation of the use it or lose it clause, which essentially requires that there are those 30 days rented in an anniversary year, and not consecutive days, but transient lodging, meaning 2 nights here, 5 nights there, to where at the time of license renewal, it has to be confirmed that those minimum transient lodging rental activities were met. And the reason for that is because in implementing CAPS, in working through these program updates, one thing that was very important to the commissioners was to make sure that people were not holding on to licenses just to hold on to them, that if you are in this pool, you are actively renting and contributing to the local economies. And so at the time of renewal of licenses starting in 2025, and the renewal process is not a straight calendar year renewal. Everyone has an anniversary month. So if you first obtained your license in July, July now becomes your annual anniversary renewal month. So as you can imagine, the bulk of the renewals come in between April and June, because most people, if they applied for a license, they were doing so just before or right at the beginning of the peak season to rent with the summer. So starting those with an annual renewal anniversary month of January, and then February, March, etc. When those renewal fees and documents came in, staff looked at the transient lodging filings to make sure that that 30-day commitment was met. And if it was not met, then licenses could not be renewed. And so that was probably the most significant new piece and final piece of this program update that did go into effect this last year. Through 2024 and 2025, we completed over 700 fire and life safety inspections countywide. So that went through the building division. They manage those inspections along with the garden variety of other inspections that they perform on a daily basis, including footings, foundations, shear wall, remodels, etc. One of the other things that was completed, I would say through the first part of 2025, was the completion of looking at parking and occupancy, verifying number of bedrooms, making sure that the occupancy and the off-street parking aligned, that if on-street parking was required or needed, that those on-street parking verifications were provided by the Tillamook County Public Works Department. It also entailed a lot of re-review of road approach and driveway permits. And in Neskowin specifically, during that process, with the program updates, no one lost their license. Everyone was able to renew. But specifically in those occupancy adjustments, the overall occupancy for the STR license pool in Neskowin went from 1,026 guests to 955. So there was a reduction of 71 guests in those overall occupancy calculations that were reduced. And that could have been because of lack of available off-street parking spaces. It could have been because we refined the definition of bedroom. So if there was a room used as a bedroom that no longer fit that definition, or perhaps the windows in the bedrooms did not meet ingress and egress requirements, there were a lot of factors that went into that adjustment. Most of that adjustment occurred in the village area of Neskowin with a lot of the older homes and cottages. With that, the parking, so the overall number of parked vehicles associated with licensed properties in Neskowin went from 520 spaces down to 409. So there was a reduction of over 100 parking spaces with all of the licensed properties in Neskowin. And again, the majority of that reduction was in the village area. So again, no one lost their license, but we did see some shifts just based on the refinement of the licensing requirements, defining what a bedroom is, defining the size of a parking space, requiring updated site plans for properties, implementing that on-street parking verification. All of that work resulted in not a loss of licenses, but definitely an adjustment to address the parking and some of the congestion issues and concerns that we've heard about. With that was the rollout of the new enforcement pieces, which include the STR hotline data. So I have that for you this evening, as well as a hearings officer. So we did, through the first part of 2025, we did have some appeals of license closures. The closures were not because they failed to meet the requirements of the ordinance. It's because they failed to renew on time. And in those cases, the hearings officer upheld the department's decision to not renew the licenses. We went through quite a few refunds of STR operator license fees with those adjustments, those occupancy adjustments. One of the things that we learned in the program updates was that people could go online and pay their renewal fees at any time. But the time for us to look property by property at the site plan, at the parking plan, at the floor plans, we did not move as fast in that work as someone being able to go online at any time, day or night, and pay their fees. And as those adjustments started, with occupancy, we ended up having to do quite a few refunds and refund people's money back because they overpaid the the operator license fee based on occupancy. And then again, the fire and life safety inspections was a big part of the last 2 years and these program updates. So this is one of my budget slides from my budget presentation this last year. I thought this would be something to be helpful to see. So we have not increased the operator license fee or the STR program fees for new licenses or renewals since the program changes. So the program changes went into effect in 2023 and 2024. So you'll see a revenue increase there, both in license fees and inspection fees. And that reflects really that bulk of those inspections that we started doing between 2024 and that carried over to 2025. And then the license fees, what that does reflect was that slight increase with the adoption of the new ordinance and the board order that adjusted the fees. And then the new licenses came on with lifting the pause and establishing those caps. And then you can see fiscal year 2024, 2025, it started leveling out a little bit. And then off to the right-hand side, you can see the closures from 2024 and 2025. And because most communities have wait lists, you would not have seen a reduction in the number of licensed STRs in your communities. But what we know is we had verification of a few folks who told us they were closing their license because they could not meet the use it or lose it. And then the other closures in 2025, where you see that 71 countywide, many of those were because we had determined they did not meet that use it or lose it clause. It's for the rental commitment.
So Sarah,
Uh-huh.
I know we're going to wait till the end, but Barbara Gordon is asking how much, and this may be answered by your chart, but I'm not sure. How much did TLT income in Escalon decrease from 2024 to 2025?
Oh, that's a great question. And actually, if I'm not going to make anybody sick, I will go slowly. So here is that number. So we have held that $7 million mark in TLT revenue for the last few years, which is indicative overall of this chart here, where you see the 73% holding in terms of the percentage of revenue generated. I do not have in this slide, you can see the, that's just under 850,000. I do not have the numbers from the couple of years before available, but what I can tell you anecdotally is I do not think that we saw a reduction. These numbers have been holding steady for every community for the last few years.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Data. So the hotline went into effect at the very end of 2023. So this slide may look familiar. I've showed this to you before. This is the number and types of complaints that were called into the STR hotline through 2024. And it is roughly 450 complaints that were called in on the hotline. And I have broken them down into categories. You can see garbage, parking were the top complaints. There were a lot of general inquiries in the data through 2024. But yeah, there's just dog related 16. So this was what we saw through 2024.
And these are just from Nesquin, Carol?
No, this is countywide.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Countywide through 2025, we went from roughly 450 to 750 calls received or complaints filed. Of those, 135 were via web form. So this is countywide. And the complaint types highlighted the main categories down below. What seems to be tracking is roughly a third of the calls that continue to come in are not complaint related. The hotline serves as a communication tool, both not only for concerned callers to file a complaint or voice a problem, We are seeing this hotline used if guests can't get into rentals, if they don't like the rental they're in, the oven is not working, the fire alarm won't stop going off. How do I get a license? So there's a lot of other types of requests or inquiries that come through. And so just breaking this up, you can see by complaint type countywide, this is what it looks like. So here's your data for Neskowin. So of those 750-ish calls or complaints that were received, of those 143 specifically were for Neskowin. And I broke those down into the categories that you can see. So general inquiries, again, that could be all of those other miscellaneous type things. You had 56, which tracks with that roughly 1/3 proportionality, that ratio that we continue to see with just overall countywide of the portion of, or the ratio of calls that are coming in that are actually not complaint related. Lighting was a big one for Neskowin. I have been talking to my staff about that to make some program changes so that we can be more proactive and effective in addressing those complaints and actually stop them, hopefully, before they continue. Garbage continues to be a big one, parking, and then again, logging in there if an operator or a manager or an owner responded to the complaint and said, we took care of it, or we've reached out and we've addressed it. Wanted to make sure that those numbers were in there for you too. So here's your data comparison. So I went back through the 450-ish, I think it was 453 was the total, and then compared today. So it jumped from 81 to 143. But you can see here where your differences are. And the other thing that I would say, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later. So of those 750 complaints, calls that were received, what I went back and did was countywide, any property that had more than 3 complaints, I pulled out to see, are these all one-offs? How many are repeats, etc. Because one thing that I know we need to do as we finish implementing the program updates is now switch to really focus on the properties that I would say are our frequent customers for inquiries. 44 properties had 3 or more of those calls or complaints, which is roughly 4% of the pool. And so what that told us was, of the volume of complaints that we receive, it really is limited to a very small percentage of the overall STR license pool. And of those 44 properties, 8 of them are within the Neskowin community. So I will get back to that in a minute, but I thought that would be insightful to know as well.
Nancy, there's a question in the chat.
Yep, does anyone have a question?
Yeah, thank you. So Andrea Paris is asking, is there a spot online where the complaint person can see how many bedrooms or cars are available for that site?
Oh, that's a great question. So I'm going to make myself a note here, because we actually have the online registry that has occupancy and the number of parking spaces. So it doesn't give you the number of bedrooms, but it does give you the total guest occupancy for overnight stays. And that does not include the 3 kids and it does not include the additional allowances for guests during the day. Right. So the nighttime is basically from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. and everything else is daytime. And there are allowances for additional guests during that time. So let me make a note of that right here so I can show everybody where to go.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm. And that is updated frequently because this program, the online registry, is updated frequently because the program is very dynamic. There's some static that's been put to it because of the caps. But what happens within those numbers between the use it or lose it, the voluntary closures, people that did not renew in time, it still actually does change frequently. So just let you know that. But the good thing about that is that means that we're updating the registry. The other thing I would say to that real quick, those listening and participating tonight or coming back and listening to this presentation later, one thing that I have been asking communities, specifically license holders and managers, we have seen quite a shift in management companies. I think some of you know Vacasa was bought out, and we are not getting all of the updates in contact people for our license holders, which is a big deal, especially with the hotline. So if you have not yet reached out to our office, please do. And the best way to verify that we've got the right contact information is to look at that online registry, because the registry reflects the last known contact we have been made aware of.
Thank
Okay.
you. And Suzanne, sorry, I'm kind of breaking my own rule here, but Suzanne, it's kind of pertinent. Asked, can you explain the 3 kids?
Yes. So during the STR ordinance update process, when the conversation focused on what should maximum occupancy be, right? Because we did not have overall maximum occupancies for rentals. And where that was very problematic was in larger homes where there were occupancy limits of 20, 25, 28 people. And there was strong consensus from all of the communities that that was a big community livability issue, because the more people in some of these homes, the more parking, the more trash, the more noise, all those community livability concerns. And so the committee spent quite a bit of time talking about, well, what should a maximum occupancy be? And so those maximum occupancy limits were set for what is an estate home that has 5 or more bedrooms, and then for other homes. And basically the maximum occupancy is 14. But with that, especially for 3 and 4 bedroom homes, there was the conversation of, well, if you have mom and dad and grandma and grandpa, and maybe an aunt or brother, sister, whatever, if we want to encourage families to be here in these rentals, then we have to find a way to incentivize that. And that 3 kids came from that discussion of, you have your maximum occupancy, which is based on bedrooms. And then there's that overall limit based, no matter how many bedrooms you have, there's a maximum on the number of guests you can have, which is 14. But again, it's all determined by the number of bedrooms and parking. So that's the highest, but then there's all these factors that can determine if it's less than that. With that, and in our efforts to encourage family use of rentals, we came up with a bonus that in addition to your maximum occupancy, you could have up to 3 kids under the age of 12. So that if you had a 3-bedroom home, it could be mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, maybe an aunt and uncle, and the kids stay free, right? And so then that way that helped ensure families could use even some of the smaller STRs within our communities. So that's where that came from. But the children are not calculated into the maximum occupancy. So when people are advertising, they can put in the notes allows also up, can accommodate up to 3 additional kids under the age of 12, but they cannot add those 3 to their maximum occupancy. So, and that's been something we're working on that with a few of our license holders, because we've got some work to do there. So good question. Thank you. Okay. Excuse me. So what's next in 2026? So there's a few things. So one, following up on the hotline data, there are some things that we need to do some additional tracking on. One of the things that was discovered this last year was while we were tracking the data from the hotline, and I have 2 staff in my office that have been diligent in following up with owners and managers on complaints received. Violations were issued for some of those properties. We went through the violation process, but did not adequately track the number of violations. So I can tell you what the complaint data says. I can tell you that the majority of the violations that were issued this last year were actually related to exterior signage. But that is one thing we have already started talking about internally, is without having to go back through license by license. How can we improve our software and the tools that we have to do a better job of actually coming back and providing the data of the actual number of violations issued? The other thing is, and this is something, I've done this presentation a couple of times in a couple of different communities. One of the things that I have heard is that the burden on neighbors to help prove that a violation occurred is very, very difficult. And I agree. I think that we're in a place where we have owners and operators that are really doing a good job and trying to be diligent on staying on top of this. Again, pulling the actual how many properties are part of those 750 complaints or calls, knowing it is a small percentage of the overall program, the licensing pool. There are changes that we are making internally to be more effective in addressing the complaints, and also trying to figure out, in working with county council, other ways we can reduce that burden on neighbors of trying to prove there was a violation, right? Because it's all about evidence. You can say there was a complaint, but verifying whether a violation occurred, especially in real time, can be very difficult. So that is an area of improvement that we are continuing to work on. There's a few pieces of that are immediately going into effect this year. So the first one is the properties that have received 3 or more complaints are already starting to get letters from me. And even though they don't have a violation, or I can't prove that a violation occurred, I think that communication is really important to say, I've had enough complaints filed. We need to talk anyway. The other thing in the ordinance, in section 100, it requires each owner and operator to keep an individual log of the complaints they have received and how they resolved them. And I can ask for that. So with these letters and these properties, I am starting to ask for those complaint logs. That is a requirement that our owners and operators are required to maintain, is that log. So working on ways to go back through and figure out how to be more involved, not accusatory, but involved in saying, there is a concern here. There are repeated calls here. We need to talk about this. With that, so I would say just again, to those that own or operate an STR, please remember that requirement to maintain that log is there. And one of the things that I am starting to do is ask for that when I start seeing those repetitive complaints or the same property come up. The other thing with that is with the fire and life safety inspection. So we have started doing fire and life safety inspections outside of the 3 years. And that has occurred in some properties in Neskowin where we have gone in and done a fire and life safety inspection based on calls and complaints we have received about potential safety issues from guests staying in rentals. So that is something else that we are starting to follow up on. And then with that is greater engagement with Oregon Coast hosts. So I know, Nancy, we've had that conversation. I know they've been involved in conversations about the fireworks. One of the other conversations that's come up is water usage and ways to campaign and message rentals to encourage them to be more conservative and mindful about water usage in our communities, especially in the summers. And then meeting with them a couple of weeks ago, visiting with them about the complaints and the enforcement piece so that they are aware that we are going to we are starting to take additional steps to address some of these issues. With the fire and life safety inspections, there is the fire and life safety inspection checklist, but there are other components of a home that still fall under Ordinance 84 Amendment 2 requirements, and one of the biggest ones is exterior lighting. And as you have seen in your data, exterior lighting, it was one of the top complaints in the Neskowin community, and there are provisions that require that downward shield. And so one of the steps that we will be taking during inspections is to take a look at the exterior lighting around the dwelling, because if we do see those big spotlights, we cannot fail a fire and life safety inspection based on non-compliant lighting, but it can be a violation. And so one of those steps to say, you need to change your lighting on the exterior to avoid a violation.
So Sarah, that might be a
Yes.
good time to, if it's okay, Joni Bloom has a
Sure.
question here.
Hi,
Lighting
Joni.
is- Joni, do you want to ask your question or do you want me to read it?
I'm okay with you reading it. I just figured we wouldn't want to interrupt. So if you want to interrupt yourself,
Well,
knock
yes,
yourself
thank you,
out.
Joni, for being patient. I figured since she's talking lighting and you're talking lighting.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
So,
Well, there are
lighting,
two conflicting issues here, which is a problem, at least for
So-
me.
so what Joni was saying is lighting issues are conflicting. Most residents want lighting to be as minimal as possible, especially during spring and fall for bird migration. And yet during the summer, there's an influx of bears wandering the area in search of snacks, and not just on garbage night. So for any of us out at night walking or even just putting out what is supposedly a secure trash can, it could be strange to be there and encounter a bear or two. What have been the items in the data regarding lighting?
Yeah, so that is a great question and a great point, Joni. Thank you. And I would add to that one more layer, and that is the work that is coming up with the Dark Skies Ordinance. Right? Because I think, Joni, you're right. We actually call that Garbage Eve at my house for the bear buffet, right? It's like instead of New Year's Eve, there's Garbage Eve and all the bears come out. It's time to party. For me right now, with the lighting issues specifically related to short-term rentals, it's the big floodlights. It's the obvious light improvements around a home that we know just by looking at them with the naked eye are not projected in a downward direction. What we've got to do is, as I work on the Dark Skies Ordinance, which the NCAC will be a part of, because that is a land use piece. So that's going to be a piece that we have moving forward with that language. Making sure that aligns with, I would call, the safety concerns that you have brought up, because nighttime visibility is still important. It's important to make sure people don't fall and get hurt but you also want to know if there's a critter around when you're walking down the street, right? Or to your own garbage can or out in your driveway or your porch. So I think there's some good work that can be done there and that balance. So that's on the list of things for this year. So
Okay,
hopefully that at least answers your question in part.
I think so. I also I'm on Hawk Drive and the creek. I always wonder about new people coming in and bombing down the street and not knowing that there's no shoulder to speak of, not even now with the new blacktop, that I've seen golf carts fall into the creek in broad daylight. So it's lighting is a problem. It's a necessary evil, I think, in some degree. But
Okay, thank you, Joni. I'm gonna.
I appreciate
Okay.
that. Yeah. She's always got great comments. I'm
She does.
writing this down. Lighting is a problem, but a necessary evil. I agree. And we got to see about golf. I'm going to say golf cart and ped safety.
Yeah, I think you made a great point there, Joni, particularly with the dark sky
Yeah.
movement. Yeah,
Mhm.
and bears.
Bears. It's true. Okay, so moving down the list, I'm going to talk about the ST program and housing program interface. I've got some slides for you for that with some data, but the program enforcement specifically, just staying on that topic. And if you joined us, in June, we had a presentation that talked about the overall code enforcement program updates the county is making. Those do intersect with the enforcement program for the short-term rentals. And the biggest thing is just continuing to use the hearings officer and see where that aligns with the county enforcement program overall. So as we continue to work through program updates and do better with the STR program, we will see how these other overall enforcement program updates for community development and other county departments, how these can work together, and also how we can leverage and share resources. Renewal processes. So one of the other things, so you guys are actually the first to hear about this because this is something that one of the things I've been working on for the last couple of months. Part of the day-to-day challenge that we have in the department is getting folks through a renewal process timely and efficiently. And the renewal process currently consists of paying the fees, providing a copy of a garbage service provider letter, because at the time of annual renewal, you have to prove that you've had a weekly and maintain a weekly garbage service subscription. And whether it is the owner or the manager, sign the fire and life safety checklist, because we only do a fire and life safety inspection every 3 years. So in between, or if I get a complaint and I feel like an inspection is needed and appropriate. So that, excuse me, that fire and life safety checklist, again, it can be signed by anybody. It's the garbage service provider letter and paying the fees. And there is a tremendous amount of time spent by 2 staff trying to get those things from owners and operators at the time of renewal. And the most resistant piece is the weekly garbage service subscription letter. And quite frankly, the renewal process should not be such a heavy lift every month, right? There are other important things that we should be doing with the program for the benefit of owners and operators and communities, getting back to a lot of the things that we've talked about. So there's a couple of things that I am currently exploring. One is an online renewal program that would significantly shorten the renewal process. So basically it would be to go online, pay your fees, And instead of having to sign and email the fire and life safety checklist, it would be part of that when you're on, sometimes when you're agreeing to do something, there's that you scroll down, you check the box, I certify all of this stuff is true and correct or whatever. The other piece of it is instead of getting the letters, the garbage service provider letters from the individual owners and managers, just working directly with the local franchise haulers and getting that information from them. And so that is something that we are looking at to actually create efficiencies and speed up our time helping people get through renewals so we can actually do other important work that is part of this program.
So Sarah, our members here are asking these great questions in advance. So if you don't mind, we have one from Barbara Gordon. I said we'd held off to the end, but this is kind of pertinent.
No,
are
that's
there any Tillamook County plans regarding bear trash cans, bear safe trash cans? I think perhaps making them mandatory in the rural areas, or even within Nesquin proper. And I think that could also relate to STRs, making them mandatory for STR owners as well. But probably, Barbara, I'm guessing you mean anybody.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we talked about garbage cans a lot, particularly in light of bears, raccoons. And after the conversations that I had with the local franchise haulers, what we know is that they are very particular about the type and size and style of can and where it's placed. And if it's not done to their specifications, you're not going to get your garbage picked up. And because we could not align with all of the franchise haulers in the county, right? Because we're talking 75 linear coast miles. So we have more than one service provider. We couldn't come up with a standardized piece. So the ordinance does say that they have to be secure, but it does not specifically say they have to be bear-proof, because there's different types and they are not all seen equally by your garbage people. So that is why it just says secured.
Okay, thank you. And Barbara did
Great question.
She did say she means for everybody, not just
everybody.
STR people.
That would be nice.
And probably there's different limits or different needs in different parts of the county, depending on where the bears are.
It's true. In some areas, it's not the bears, it's the raccoons. And in other areas, like there's more cougars than there are bears or raccoons. So, pick your, or elk, pick your community there. It changes everywhere. What else you got for me, Nancy? Anything else?
That's it so far.
Okay.
Anybody at this point, it's a good stopping point if anyone has any questions. Also, I had mentioned that Michael Beachley, our parliamentarian, is available if you want to consult on how to form a question. And he has changed his name to parliamentarian. So if you want that, you go up into chat, go up to new chat and scroll down till you find parliamentarian, and you can send a private message to Michael for his help. All right. Thank you.
Okay. So 2 more things on the list. The sub-area STR cap evaluation, one thing that we had talked about with that wait and see approach was looking at exempting the condos and reevaluating the cap number for the community. So that is something that I will be working on. Right now, I am looking at all of the communities and watching their wait lists, watching the turnover and the rollover based on the use it or lose it, etc. So that is something happy to start that conversation tonight, just to go back and reassess how people feel about the condos being exempted. The other thing is we are working on a TLT online payment portal so that people who are filing, even if you don't rent in a quarter, you still have to file your form, your transient lodging tax form quarterly. And so the other thing my office, Tommy and I are working on is an online portal for that as well. Okay.
So now that you're going on to another subject, we have a new question.
Yes, please.
From Andrea Paris, what is the
Mhm.
requirement of the grandfathered STR before selling their property as a titled STR? I guess you're asking if it's transferable, Andrea?
Mhm. That's what I'm thinking. That's
Yes.
what I heard.
That's
Okay.
what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay. So properties licensed before the Second Amendment of Ordinance 84 was adopted by the commissioners in July 2023. So licensed properties that had a license prior to that adoption date in July 2023 were given a one-time transfer opportunity. Licenses obtained after July 2023 have no transferability. So if you have a license and you had that license prior to July 2023, and that transfer has not yet occurred, there should be one transfer available. But you'll want to reach out to my office so we can verify that specifically for your property. We're happy to do that.
I guess I have
was
one brief
Sure.
question that goes with that. The grandfathered short-term rental folks, do they have to have 30 days a year that they have been renting out their property as well?
Yes, everyone does.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Mhm. And with that, with the one-time transfer, one of the other significant changes to the program in 2023 was that you could only have ownership interest in one STR licensed property moving forward. So prior to July 2023, let's say you have, 3 licensed properties, maybe 1 in Pacific City and 2 in Nescoin. You retain those licenses, but after that July 2023 date, you cannot obtain any additional licenses for short-term rentals in unincorporated Tillamook County. So right, 2 of the most significant changes was limiting transfers to one time for existing licensed properties, and then no transfers for properties licensed after July 2023. The second big change was limiting ownership ability. And those two provisions were put into place largely because of the depletion of our available housing stock in many areas throughout the county.
Is there a time limit on the grandfathered people as far as how many they have?
No,
Or that goes on? Okay, thank you.
no, you just can't have any more. So if you have 5, you can keep all your 5, but you just, until, if you sell one, whatever, but you can't have any more.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay, good questions. All right, we ready to move on, Nancy? Okay.
No, I see one just popped up.
Okay.
For Carlos Monreal, I'm probably butchering your name
Yeah.
the second. What about 2 units on one property? Do you need 2
Oh.
STRs since they can be rented individually?
That's a great question. Hi, Carlos. It's nice to hear from you again. I think we did some permitting work together not that long ago. So each unit requires a license. It doesn't matter if you rent them together or not, and each unit must have an individual license to be part of the short-term rental program. If you build it, so again, after that 2023 date, if you acquired a duplex and you wanted to license it, you would have to pick one unit, and that is the only unit that would get that license. And you could not use the other unit as part of it. So it's unit specific, and it is now limited to 1.
Okay, so we're getting quite a few more questions. Sarah, at this point, would you rather just go through your presentation and we'll hold the rest of them till the end?
I can, sure.
Okay,
I'm
why don't
almost
we do
done.
that? Okay,
Okay.
so John, if you could hold for just a moment, and then
Okay.
we'll ask your question.
So, and this is a great segue actually into the housing stock question, because part of what has always been a very lively and albeit sometimes contentious conversation has been the question of the cause and effect of short-term rentals and high home prices in our coastal real estate market. And what data has shown us through 2 iterations of a housing needs analysis that we have done for Tillamook County is that there used to be a coastal market and an interior market. So the coastal market would be communities like Niskowen. The interior market could be Cloverdale, it could be Hebo, it could be Tillamook. Bay City is more of the interior market than the coastal market. And that has all changed because we, no surprise to us, live in a very highly sought after area. In Oregon, everyone wants to live here. And the demand has driven housing prices up everywhere. And then you add the competition for transient lodging and short-term rentals, and that really, we have the data that proves that that really exacerbated our issue. So part of the process, as we were looking at short-term rentals, we were making those adjustments to transferability, limitation, and ownership. Was also looking at how can we move the needle in such a competitive market to see if we can get these things to work together rather than work against one another. And the short-term rental operator license fee was implemented specifically to help with housing, workforce housing initiatives, and public safety initiatives. And so that license revenue has a 75-25 split. 75% of the STR operator license fees go to housing initiatives. 25% go to public safety. So the code enforcement program updates we've made that we talked about in June, the funding support for that is coming from that 25% of STR operator license fees, because we just simply do not have the revenue in the general fund to support that work. We would have to look at taking away from other county services if general fund had to support that. So we are using that public safety portion of that STR operator license fee revenue to go to support enforcement. The 75% has gone to housing. So we started 4 years ago a Housing Production Solutions Fund. So Dave Bennett, who is a member of your community, sits on the Tillamook County Housing Commission and is actually the chair of the Finance Committee. So I just want to give Dave a shout out because he has done tremendous work in helping the Housing Commission and the Finance Committee specifically with this grant program. So as of this year, so this is the 4th year we have had this grant program open, which is again also supported by STR operator license fees. We have now awarded roughly $1.5 million in 4 years to local housing projects. One of the projects that you have seen that you may be most familiar with is the Kingfisher Apartments in Pacific City. That was a recipient of one of the first recipients of the Housing Production Solutions Fund. This money is used countywide. And on this slide, what you see in the upper left-hand corner is a project called Thompson Springs. It is a housing community that is in Nehalem that is specifically for adults with intellectual and physical disabilities. And so it is a community and a place for them to live and to own a small home. There are a few middle housing projects. So in the left center, what you see is, those are, the second one over, those are Habitat for Humanity projects in Bay City. And then moving over on the screen, the Nehalem Bay Health District, so they recently completed a new health center building in Wheeler, and they were a recipient to look at re-envisioning the old facilities to convert them to workforce and affordable housing. we have a couple of middle housing projects. And then down on the lower left-hand corner, one of the recipients this year was the Beaver Grade School Project, and that will create 32 new housing units in the Beaver community, along with a new community center. There is, this work also has supported a new apartment program in the Manzanita area that will be one of the few low income projects, and then as well as a 72-unit apartment workforce housing project next to the hospital in Tillamook. So, you know, when we talk about operator license fees, when we talk about short-term rentals and figuring out how to move that needle and to alleviate the competition and look at ways where we can actually look at housing production, we are seeing some great results. And so the last piece of that, of the housing, is since 2019, what we know is between units we've recovered, units we built, and the resources we have put towards housing intentional in Tillamook County, is we have total, through recovery and new construction, over 800 units since 2019 countywide. So we are moving the needle. We are seeing that, and we are very, very excited about that. And then just to recap from June, to talk about what else we've got going on with that operator license fees, the 25% for public safety initiatives. And this slide captures what we talked about largely in June with the new program updates for enforcement. The other thing is with the property tax exemption that the county adopted a couple of years ago, also to help with housing, out of the public safety fund is a, I wouldn't call it a rebate. It's a payment to the fire district. So if there's an active property tax exemption in a fire district, a portion of the funds from the public safety, 25%, are provided to the fire district to offset the tax revenue that they would get if a project that is eligible for an exemption was on the tax roll. And so the Nestucca Rural Fire Protection District just received a check for roughly $9,000 for the Kingfisher apartment tax exemption. So money was recycled through the operator license fee to support through the Housing Production Solutions Fund and a grant award, and then the fire district, to offset the loss of that tax revenue, just received a payment for that exemption, and will continue to get a payment annually for the life of that property tax exemption for that workforce housing development. And then let's see, I think this just shows overall where we're at with the number of licenses per community. And so this is in the board order. And then staff contacts. So y'all know how to get a hold of me, but I'm not the only one that works here. And I got some staff that do a good job that are super important. And these are the point people for the short-term rental and transient lodging tax division. And so that's it.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah. We do have some questions. I do
Sure.
want to mention that I did put Sarah's presentation in the meeting folder, so you can all download that if you'd like. And Candace will see what we can do to get that in the archives or on the main page of the website too. But thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and ask them in order. Joan, please clarify ESER septic report frequency. Ordinance 84 Amendment 2 says every 5 years, but most recent renewal paperwork says every 3 years.
That is a good question. Let me get to that place in the ordinance. You know, one thing I always tell my staff is I say, go back and read it in the ordinance before you say it. Okay. So there is an ESER is required to be conducted within 5 years of the date of the short-term rental application or renewal. But there are, let's see, If the system was installed more than 5 years from the time of the STR license application submittal, the property owner shall also obtain, an authorization notice. So it's the authorization notice, and then it's the ESER every 5 years. It says, after an initial ESER is obtained, the property owner shall thereafter be required to conduct periodic maintenance, which at a minimum shall include an inspection of the system prior to renewal of the license. So the on-site wastewater division is delegated the authority to determine the periodic maintenance. So sometimes, so I will say that is the ESER for 5 years, but there's also what overlaps that is if you have a special type of system, because not all septic systems are standard systems. There are some that are sand filters or others. There may be an additional time period to that because of the type of system, and it may not actually be related directly to this program, but it may be because of other requirements. We're working on a bunch of stuff with DEQ. But if it's just a standard system, it should be the 5 years. So I
Okay,
will make a
thank
note
you.
of that for my staff.
Thank you. And Carol Hepburn, you asked if there's a slide, and I wasn't sure what you meant. Would you like to clarify?
It seemed that Sarah was talking about some slide that was on the screen, and I just didn't see anything on the screen was all.
Oh,
Yeah, there was a slide on the screen. You weren't seeing anything at all, or not pertaining to what she was talking about?
I wasn't seeing the slide. I can see all the people in the meeting.
Oh, yeah, now she's stopped the presentation, but when you asked the question, she had her presentation up.
Okay, I'll look for the recording. That's fine.
Okay, and the presentation is in the meeting folder right now that you can get to on the event page of the website where you registered. Okay, and then Guy, do you want to ask your question, or do you want me to read it?
Well, I could ask Sarah, when you were talking about workforce housing, increase some of the projects that were going on. I read within the last couple of days that DLCD is still in a rulemaking thing about middle housing for unincorporated communities. And I was just wondering, somehow I think you're on that rulemaking group. I may be wrong on that, but what can we expect in changes for housing ordinances or regulations for NESCO and other unincorporated communities? What are they talking about? I couldn't find anything about what they're discussing.
So if you guys don't mind, I would love to answer Guy's question real quick. So Guy, thank you for asking that. There are several rules advisory committees that are happening right now related to housing efforts statewide. And yes, I do sit on a couple of them. The middle housing rack for unincorporated communities, what I see happening is them actually following the work we've done elsewhere across the state. I am not expecting any changes for us.
Okay, good.
We've already done the work.
Okay.
And if that changes, I'll let you know. But I think we have stepped into the gold standard of that, and watching us, they are looking at carrying out that work throughout the state.
Okay.
Thank you. And then the last question we have so far from Suzanne. How does Suzanne Gowan? How does the cap on licensing of STR units apply to LLCs that own these units? Own is in quotes. Can someone create multiple LLCs to get around the expansion cap?
That's a great question. And I think that that's a legitimate question. When we see LLCs come in, either with new applications or an alteration for an ownership change, all of those go to county council to help us review. We will ask for articles, etc., because we want to see who all of the owners are. So, because it can get very complicated. So, technically, again, it's that limit one ownership interest, whether it's an LLC or some other ownership arrangement. And so that's why we were very diligent in checking that anytime an LLC comes through.
Okay, thank you. By the way, a lot of the people have said thank you in the chat after you've
Oh,
answered their
yeah.
questions. So
My pleasure.
I haven't read all of those.
I see my
So-
buddy Tom on there. He's got his mute off, so I think he might want to ask a question. I'm always interested in what Tom has to ask.
Well, I just sent a message that I have a question. Actually, I've got a few, but I'll ask one. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Tom.
I think you said at the beginning that in terms of implementing the ordinance and doing renewals of licenses, your staff did something in excess of 700 inspections. Then I was just wondering if that, and I'm assuming inspections, as you suggested, determine if there was the proper occupancy, parking, meeting the safety standards, windows, ingress and egress. And I was just wondering, is that 760 cover all of unincorporated Tillamook County, all of the STRs? There's still some to do. And the same question for Neskowin.
So that is the total we did countywide in all unincorporated areas of the county. I do not have the specifics for Neskowin.
Okay.
But we did a lot in Neskowin, and we continue to do them. Yes.
Are there more to do as renewals come up?
Yes, because they're on a 3-year cycle.
Right.
So there are every year there's fire and life safety inspections to do beyond just new licenses. And then, as I had mentioned, when we get those concerns called in about perhaps unsafe conditions in a rental, we are starting to do those inspections as well and following up on those.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So I have a question myself, and I think it's based some on the Hillary's question that I sent you. So am I understanding correctly that a lot of the work that's been done over the last 2 to 3 years is to kind of go through and do these inspections and do this initial registration and all the things to kind of set the program in place? And now you should be able to have a little more manpower to respond to complaints and that kind of thing, or am I misreading that?
No, that is very true, Nancy. And it's not just, I mean, like I mentioned, Paige specifically is calling owners, operators to follow up on complaints, right? What we need to do a better job in and be able to focus our time and resources in is the violation piece in terms of, tracking those. I have a new form that I've started for violations, especially the warnings. So there's things like we are working on those efficiency pieces. And then, the 3 or more, get a letter from me. Let's talk about your own log. So those are the pieces. You are correct, as we have finished really standing up all of the implementation pieces of this program. And I will say, help people through these renewal processes, at least now once, it is time to shift our attention and focus. And, that's one of the conversations, like I said, I had with Oregon Coast Hosts is, we have helped everybody get here. And now there are other equally important pieces of our job we need to start doing. And to me, standing up an online renewal process, working with our local franchise haulers instead of waiting for piecemeal letters to come in that may or may not say weekly, may or may not say the right thing, reaching back out to owners. It is a tremendous amount of time. June alone, June is our peak, and I want to say there's roughly 350 renewals for that month alone. So if you have Paige who is trying to get that information and trying to do these other things. It's not a good use of her time, and it's certainly not efficient. So we are working right now to figure out how we can increase those efficiencies, which actually, from a customer service standpoint for our license holders, should also make things easier, because instead of them having to provide that weekly garbage service letter, I'm just going to get it from the franchise hauler and have
No,
them
it sounds like
verify.
a win-win. I mean, really, it's
Yeah.
sounds like you're really trying to streamline some things. And I know from your June code enforcement hearing or presentation, I mean, it's really impressive, the work across departments that has gone on, that I know you've taken quite the leadership role in too, to set up
Thank you.
and having a code enforcement officer and that kind of thing. So sounds like it's all gelling really well.
Thank you. Yes. And that is the other thing, is we actually lost our code enforcement officer last year, who was a part-time retired rehired sheriff's deputy. So that person helped us do a lot of the signage checks and a lot of the things. So it is really about pooling resources, using tools and technology that help us do a better job, and hopefully provide some more additional conveniences for license holders, but then really free up our time to look at the other things, and do the other things we are supposed to be doing. And just really appreciate everyone's patience with me and the department and other departments as we keep trying to work through this stuff, understanding we've got limited funding sources to do this work that we know is important.
Mhm. And it does sound like another message is when you see a violation, please call. Make your complaint. That
Yeah.
you guys are tracking these things. So
I would say one of the things that really bothers me the most is just trying to figure out how to remove the burden that I know exists for neighbors that are seeing a violation, and just the burden of proof. It's important, it's valid, it's needed, but how do we make that work to where it's not just solely burdened by the person next door or the person down the street? I know that's tough, and that is a piece we are actively talking about internally.
well, that's great. And I know Hillary Gibson from Oregon Coast Hosts, and you guys are working together. I know that she also and Oregon Coast Hosts really want to be able to understand these things. She had mentioned in a previous meeting about how they don't always hear, owners don't always hear from the management companies when something's going on. And so, if you're a neighbor of somebody and you see a violation, you may want to talk with the owner directly, because they may not have heard. So
Well,
I
and
think you
that's-
alluded to that early on also.
I did, and that's where that letter of just making owners aware,
Mhm.
because you're right. I mean, we see that too with management companies, and we've got some really good managers out there. I want to say that we have managers that are really on top of things, but we also know that there are some property owners who just, it's like out of sight, out of mind.
Mhm.
And so they are not all these things. And that awareness, I think, is a really important first step, is so that they understand that these calls and these concerns are coming in.
Okay, thank you. So we have Barbara Gordon in the chat, and then I see Candace has raised her hand. But Barbara wrote, when you or staff call an owner about an official complaint, do you specifically notify the owner manager that this call should go into their official complaint log?
That's a great question. The ordinance requires them to keep their own log regardless. So if I call or send written correspondence saying, I'd like, you have 2 weeks to give me your log, I'm going to take that log and look at it, and what I see on the complaint log from my end should be on theirs. And then they may have additional complaints as well, because we also know some people call owners or managers directly and do not call through our complaint service.
Sounds great. So I notice people are starting to raise their hands, and I'm going to ask people to please put in the chat that you'd like to ask a question for now, because I don't see all the screens here. We actually have more than one screen on my computer. But for now, Candace, and I see Michael.
Yeah, just a quick question, Sarah. So you were talking about when people file complaints that you guys need to have evidence. I know that's hard to get. What if more than one neighbor calls on the same complaint, about, the same thing, maybe the 3 or 4 neighbors, do you still need to have, what kind of evidence would you need for that?
That is a great question, Candace, and it depends on the type of complaint, right? So when I get that stuff, that's one of the reasons. So thank you for asking this. This is one of the reasons why I'm starting that letter and reaching out, is because if that happens, regardless of whether or not I have evidence, something has occurred. And even if I can't prove it, and the people calling in can't prove it, there's been enough, something has happened. And I'm just hoping that, again, let's talk about this, and I'd like to see your own complaint log. I'm hoping that will help kind of raise some accountability. I think the line there that will be difficult is in some instances. I mean, I'm not saying this in this going, just like Nancy said, keeping things in general terms. I am also aware that there are some neighborhoods and some neighbors where there is an STR in their neighborhood, and it doesn't matter what is or is not happening in that rental. They don't want it. They hate it, and they're calling anyway. I saw somebody close a car door and I heard it, and so for me, part of that, I think, in working with neighbors and working with owners and operators, is also appropriately teasing out when it is a legitimate concern, because 4 people called in with a legitimate call, and it's not just about your neighbors don't like that they have a rental. Something is happening here. So I'm trying to figure out and explore ways to keep those conversations going, hoping that just the fact that they know that I'm paying attention may make a difference.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Sarah. Boy, I don't want your job. And Michael.
Yeah. Hi, Sarah. It's
Hi.
nice to see you. I really do appreciate having you come. We all do.
And I
We're
owe
all
you
we're
a
all
phone
aware.
call.
I know.
I know. I thank you. I'm so sorry. I'm writing
That's
it
okay.
down.
We'll talk, and and that's sort of in the ballpark of my question. And we all know you're overwhelmed. If not overwhelmed, at least your plate is very, very full with very limited resources. But the question I have is can you walk us through the process of a complaint arriving, particularly a complaint that may be a danger to health and safety, and whether or not the complainant should come to your office or perhaps call the sheriff or call the fire department, or what office really should a complaint go to? And then what, generally speaking, happens after that complaint? And of course, the substance of my question is that a few of us do know that there are instances that fall into this category currently.
Yes.
And they are of concern. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you. So there was a recent instance. So first and foremost, to answer your questions, those should come to my office. They can come by way of the complaint form. They can come by way of the hotline. Paige diligently looks at the hotline, right? So that is something that she diligently checks. Obviously, we're not here on the weekends, so that is a first thing Monday morning as well. There have been instances where we have received complaints, I would say from, not only neighbors, but from guests. And most recently, there was an instance to where complaints were filed with the state fire marshal's office, the fire department. And actually, I was not the first one to get them. I was the last.
Oh.
And immediately reached out to county council because I did have concerns as well. And ended up reaching out to that operator and was on site to do a fire and life safety inspection within a couple of days. I have to, what the ordinance says is I have to give reasonable notice. But in the correspondence was, we need to come in and do this inspection, or I'm suspending your license until it's done. And so we did follow up with that. The fire department was part of that process because the safety concerns extended beyond the fire and life safety pieces, and the owner operator did cooperate with our office and the fire department to get those things addressed. So we are doing that work.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Sarah.
Mhm.
We have Guy Sievert, and then Barbara Gordon has a question. But Guy, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Sarah, the reason why I asked about the middle housing potential changes was, communities like ours are going to get more pressure to produce more housing. And I think about when you work with the county commissioners,
Mhm.
you talked earlier about the caps, how much, if there's any, and I'm wondering, is there any pressure on increasing the caps for income reasons or whatever, or is there any pressure decreasing the caps because of middle housing concerns? I know that the good balance is we're using money from this program, STR program, to produce more housing. Whether or not it can produce enough, I'm not sure, or the kind of housing that we need. But so in the 10,000 or 50,000 foot level, my question is, where do you see the county going in the next 5 years or whatever, with the pressure on short-term rentals, the pressure on middle housing? It's great to hear that we're not going to see any more changes from DLCD. So where do you see our direction especially with the SDR program?
That's a great question, Guy. And I think that is one thing that we will probably have an answer to that within this next year. And for a couple of reasons. One of the things that I've been visiting with the commissioner's office about is a strategic plan process, because with its 50-50 split for TLT, we've done a lot of work with budgets, trying to really think about, how to be effective with budgeting to sustain services and staffing so that we can provide the services that we want to provide to communities. There is a place for short-term rentals in that discussion, especially given that 70% of the transient lodging tax is generated from STRs.
Right.
Does that mean they're going to, open the floodgates and we're going to see a bunch of new STR licenses? I don't think so. But a strategic approach to look at what does thoughtful growth continue to be, I think will be part of the conversation. With that, on the housing side, we are currently working on buildable lands inventories, housing needs assessment, and housing capacity assessment. So wearing one of my other hats, that is the next phase of 406, and just actually got out of a very extensive meeting about that today. And I can share a couple of numbers with you guys about that if you're interested, but basically for what we're seeing is preliminary housing production targets for all of unincorporated Tillamook County. So not just one specific community, but all of our communities combined. Right now, the 20-year projection is it's just under 1,200 units in 20 years. And what I thought was interesting about that is that the two highest numbers for area median income, so our two highest needs are area median incomes that exceed the 120% threshold, and area median incomes between the 80 and 120%. So, and our largest need in that 20-year projection, the most units needed actually exceed that 120% AMI, which is the area median income.
Retirees. I mean, the move of retirees to the coast.
That's right.
And-
So when we talk about Neskowin and other communities, y'all need housing too, right? And so I will have more on this work over the coming months, but I think it will be very interesting to your point, to your question about how does all of this fit together?
Right.
We're doing that work.
And hopefully the individual communities like Neskowin will be involved in that discussion, I think. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, there's parts of it. So part of the goal 10, which is the housing element of the comp plan, part of this work, I will have to update that element. So the CACs and communities, I will let you know what that looks like because it will reflect what these housing need projections are going to tell us. Right. So it's coming. Yeah. But I mean, we're already seeing, I mean, if you look at the Housing Production Solutions Fund, the units, the changes to the STR program, in just a couple of years, we've already started seeing how the dynamics are changing. And honestly, we're one of the few areas, especially on the coast, where we are seeing that dial turn. And so that is really exciting. So I don't think we're on the perfect track, but I think we're going in a good direction.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I think we have one last question from Barbara Gordon, which is intriguing. Well, no, and we'll have another one. So that that car door example is a great example. So I guess I am confused about complaint calls and what should go into the complaint log. Obviously, a complaint about a car door slamming is not worthy of consideration. So how does an owner manager keep track of what is legitimate or complaint log worthy?
That's a great question. So I would say the ordinance clearly outlines what is a violation. So the log should be directed towards what constitutes a violation. So if it's noise, especially during quiet time hours, parking, occupancy, if there are other garbage is a big one, dogs, even though dogs aren't part of that, but it's a big complaint in the community. I would say, it should be Ordinance 84 Amendment 2 focused. But we also get other types of complaints that I think could go into the noise category or anything else. So I would just say, we know what those violations, we know what is a violation of the ordinance, and those are the things that should be logged.
So it might be like a barking dog or something like that. Should people err on the side of they put down complaints, but they say specifically what they are so that they've got the legal background, or I mean, backing that they filed this, but it's not, your people could say, yeah, that doesn't count or something like that, or.
Right. And we know, I mean, if you look at those numbers, there are non-ordinance complaints that are called in all the time. We get it too. And I think it's that space of working together and finding what's reasonable and legitimate.
Yeah. And I'm sure that'll evolve over time as you're all getting used to this too. But thank you.
I agree.
And Tom Prahadich has a comment on caps.
Yeah, as a preface to that, I was going to say that I think the ordinance has improved. The ordinance that was passed in July of 2023 has improved conditions. And I think part of that is, even if you're understaffed, this is one of the reasons I asked about inspections earlier. Part of the enforcement process, a predicate to enforcement, is going around and telling people what the rules are and in which ways they comply and in which ways they don't comply. And I think that's made a huge difference. I mean, I've seen changes, for example, on the online site on occupancy and parking with respect to STRs that I thought were probably over the limit that's been corrected. And there's maybe there's more that can be done. I get the impression that the commissioners are probably not interested in revisiting a host scale amendment to the STR ordinance. And that's fine with me. You mentioned earlier that, so, you know, in part, I applaud your department. You know, I think that and the ordinance change. About caps, you know, we had, I think we had a meeting. If I was just looking at this the other day. We had a meeting in February of 2024, so roughly 6 months after the ordinance was passed, to reconsider or to consider whether the cap of 191 STRs should be raised, lowered. And I wrote a fairly long letter, as is my wont, about why I thought we should defer it to the future. That was 2.5 years ago. You mentioned that, and I don't think this is probably going to happen tonight because we're running out of time, but you would like to, at some point, talk about the cap issue and including whether or not to exempt the properties that are in what used to be the hotel, the condominiums. And before we have that conversation, I think all of us need to think about where we are now, and not only what we were thinking at the time, but what we're thinking now. I know that in Save Our Neighborhoods, there was some, you know, the organization that I represented, there was some disagreement about whether condos should be exempted or not. And so I'm hoping that if that's going to come up again, you'll visit us again. We can have that conversation after we've got some notice that it's coming. I'm fairly happy with 191. I know not everyone is, but I think it's worked pretty well.
I appreciate that feedback, Tom. Thank you. The other thing I would say is one of our observations has been the wait lists actually move pretty quickly. You know, and I think that use it or lose it piece has been a big part of that. And, you know, is there a need to adjust the cap? Maybe not, because we know that wait list actually has a pretty good rate of movement. People are not on it very long. And so it may be that where it is fine. You know, it may be that we don't have to exempt those properties. I think those are really good things for us to talk about and to think about. And I think that could be, you know, the next conversation. But what I'd also like to run the dwelling data to see where that 191 fits, because we have had additional homes built in the community. So it may actually now be a lower percentage, and then is it good keeping it where it is, right? I mean, because I think over time, we're not seeing attrition, but what we're seeing is that gap is widening. The other piece that I was just putting on my economics hat, when you talk about supply and demand and oversaturation, we are seeing that oversaturation in other communities. And, you know, are we seeing it here? I think we've definitely seen a slowdown. Your wait list was at 18 not that long ago. You know, and so that demand is slowing down. And for those in the pool that are renting, and there's that economic competitive piece, maybe not touching it is also good for them. You know, I think there's a lot of layers to this for us to talk about.
Yeah, I think, you know, if you reopen the conversation, which I think could happen or not. I mean, there are people 3 years ago in Neskowin that wanted 10%, and there were people in Neskowin that wanted 30%. And I thought, you know, 21%, particularly when you're doing it on the number rather than percentage, which means the 21% is no longer 21%. It's probably closer to 19, somewhere in 18 to 20. That was a reasonable compromise at the time. I'm speaking for me as opposed to Save Our Neighborhoods, but But anyway, if we're going to revisit that, we need to think about all the issues related to it, and people need to reconnect to the issues in terms of their observations. And anyway, that's my comment about that. I think just to me, the most important thing about the ordinance was the cap. Occupancy and parking, yes, the safety concerns, but the cap was the best way to regulate the conditions that people were seeing, the livability concerns.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Susan Schoenberg has a question. If a person applies to have an STR before putting their house on the market, will the new buyer have the waitlist position transferred to them from the seller?
That's a great question. So yes, we have been doing that, right? Once you have a license, it doesn't, like if you don't have the transfer, they don't get it. But if the property is on the wait list and there's an ownership change, we have honored that place on the wait list for that property.
Thank you.
Okay.
I don't
Good.
see any
Another
more
great question.
questions. Boy, people have really hung in. 25
Thank you
still.
so much.
So, Sarah, I just want to thank you so much for coming in and bringing all this information, and for all the work you and your department are doing every day, not just on STRs, but on everything, and all your support of the NCAC. And thank you all, everybody, all of our members who are here today. Sarah's presentation is in the meeting folder. We will be putting the video on the archive. Candace, thank you very much. Candace is doing an amazing job managing our website and email system and everything. She was on vacation in Hawaii a couple of weeks and I had to fill in, and I grew to even appreciate her more. So thank you. Thank you all. I adjourn the meeting at 8:52 p.m. and thank you all. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your
Thanks, Sarah.
evening.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you so
So
much,
good to
Sarah.
see you.
Sarah,
Take
thanks,
care.
Nancy.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you.